Steve, in terms of your 100 tests that you've been involved as head coach of the All Blacks, where does this one rate in terms of personal satisfaction based on what the boys did for you tonight?
Oh, look, every test match when we play well, it doesn't have to be the 100th one. It just has to be a test, because it's a privilege to be part of it. And when they play as well as they did tonight, you're just extremely proud of them. And we had to respond to a performance last week that probably we would all say wasn't good enough from our point of view, and an exceptional performance from Australia. So 7 days is a long time in sport, and we've seen that before. And this week they've worked hard, and everyone's done their job, from the analysts right through to the players, and you've just got to be proud of them.
You've often said that it shouldn't take something like what happened last week in Perth to get this kind of response. Are there any little things that you've noted from this week that you feel you're going to be able to use, so you're not going to need to get punched in the nose, as you put it, to get the response that you wanted?
Look, you'll take a lesson that we've all learnt in life many times, that if you get comfortable, you're going to get a punch in the nose. And, you've got to be uncomfortable. You've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And unfortunately, sometimes when you're successful, that doesn't happen, and eventually it catches up and it bites you. So I was just really, really proud of the boys, how they responded to last week. There's been a lot of things said in the media, and a lot of things, spoken about within the team, and that creates the pressure to have to step up to the plate. And the guy that probably led from the front was one of the guys that copped a lot of criticism, the fellow on my left here. And so extremely proud of how he led the week and how he played tonight.
We're with Sav right in the middle on the left.
Steve, given the week you had, how confident were you, or could you sense that sort of performance was in the offing tonight?
Look, you can feel the difference when it says, like, I don't know if you'll understand what I'm about to tell you, but if it's right that far down on the piece of string, it's obvious that we're too loose. If it's right down that end of the, we're in the house, so to speak. It's the bit in the middle you don't know about, and I don't think there's a coach on the planet, any sport, can know that. So this week it was pretty easy. We knew we were down that end, because we got towed up last week, and I'm not sure that any All Black team has ever enjoyed that experience, and this one certainly didn't. And so it was reasonably easy to see that they were in the house. What we couldn't see was where Australia were, and it only takes a little small degree of change, and maybe they weren't in the same place they were a week ago, and then you see the result change. But both teams are very talented teams, and both teams will go to the World Cup with big chances of winning it, I think.
Did you expect that sort of performance from your two new wingers, who obviously stood out amongst others tonight?
Well, you don't put people in your team if you don't expect them to be able to play at that level. And I said during the week that we've seen enough of them to know that they can cope, being an All Black. And what a wonderful opportunity to see if they can cope with the pressure of such a big occasion. And I think everybody saw what happened. They both played very well.
Yep, in the front row here.
Steve, probably the only two differences between your scrum this week and last week was introducing Nepo, and also the conditions, the weather. Why did you guys have so much ascendancy this week compared to last week?
I think there's more changes than that. I think there's a new law that says you can't lean, and we worked hard at not leaning, and maybe that gave us an advantage, getting it right in that area. And then no doubt Nepo played well, but I think when you start saying that your scrum's all about one person, you're in a wee bit of trouble. It takes 8 guys to get your scrum right, and they all worked hard regardless of what number they had on their back.
Jamie, in the front row here.
Kieran, how gratifying was it to have that period of dominance with only 14 men after what happened last week?
Yeah, it wasn't great from us to go down to 14 men. I think that's a lesson we've got to take on the chin over these last couple of weeks. But yeah, I think it was built from the start of the game, you know. Last week when we went down to 14 men, we hadn't started well, whereas this week we'd started well, had momentum. And the guys, what Steve said, we're up for it. So it wouldn't have mattered, I guess, so much when you go down to 14 men when you're in that mindset.
Yeah, Patrick over there on the left.
Steve, what's wrong with Richie? What's his injury?
He's got a sore shoulder. Probably the best I can tell you. He's not that bad. Doc said he'll be fine. So
He'll be all right for
he got tipped up, I think, and fell on his shoulder. So
no fears for
no.
Japan.
We'll know more in the morning, but Doc's pretty comfortable with where he's at.
Yeah, Christy in the middle there.
Steve, it seemed like there was a clear tactic to kick much more. Maybe the weather played a part in that, but did you feel like you could exploit Kurtley Beale a little bit at fullback?
We didn't go out naturally to exploit Kurtley. We went out because it was wet and we wanted to control the game. And, you know, at one stage in the box, we were talking about it. You know, we've kicked well, and you know, it's probably the first test this year that we've actually controlled the game through, you know, the benefit of having both those two drivers on the park, and the halfbacks also did a pretty good job. So, and they were complemented by great chasing. You know, both wingers chased well, and as we did in the middle of the park. So it's a combination of all of that. You know, you can't just do it because you want to kick, and you know, you can put the kick on the spot, but if no one chases it, then you're giving people space and time, and you get punished for it.
Yep, where you go, Mark.
Kieran, you said yesterday that this was a moment made for an All Black, and that you were confident the boys would front. What did you learn from your team today after this 80 minutes?
Oh, look, I think it's a great confidence boost for us, but I think it's the week that's probably the biggest lesson for us. You know, knowing how to prepare ourselves to get into a mental state and a physical state to put a performance like that. So that's the key that us as leaders and guys in this team will have to make sure we bottle, I guess, and use later in the year.
Sam in the middle.
Steve, did you see enough in your back row tonight to think that that's now rusted on for the World Cup, or is it going to be a horses for courses kind of situation?
Oh, you'll have to wait. It's one of those questions that comes back as you'll have to wait. But was I happy with the number our loose forwards? If you ask me that question, extremely. And I reckon someone should ask Foz a question, because
it's past my bedtime.
We scored quite a few tries today, and that's usually because your attack's pretty good.
Ian.
Andrew.
Sorry. In amongst a number of very good performances, how do you rate Anton Leonard-Brown tonight?
Good.
Very
Very
good.
pleased with him. You know, I thought he. Well, I think he's been one of a. You know, he's had a great year right through the year, and tonight, you know, I think we saw he's a bit unorthodox. He doesn't sort of run lines that everyone else runs it, and he finds a way to do things, and he. You know, good line breaks, but it's his work rate going back and forth and support, I think, that's particularly holds him in good stead. So, again, I think he's really benefited from a number of starts and a lot more game time, and showing that he's a quality player.
We'll go front row, and then we'll go Nigel at the back.
Ian, that was Richie and Bowden's probably most assured performance that we've seen so far. How did you rate what they put out there today?
Yeah, look, I'd probably use the word you use, which is assured. I think, you know, when you're starting some things off, it does take a little while, and it takes a little while for the instincts to kick in, and I think we've seen that the last couple of tests. And tonight, they're probably forced more into a two-pivot role with the conditions, and in some ways that made it a little bit easier. But it's also a result of 2 or 3 solid weeks of playing and training together, and things just started to look a little bit more intuitive to them. So that side of it's good, and it was also good, I thought, when Geordie came on at fullback, and I thought he'd made a massive impact off the bench. So, you know, there's another thing in the jigsaw.
Nigel and then Ross.
Steve, how disappointed are you with Dane getting yellow carded for trying to chuck a halfback into the front row of the Western stand?
Oh, well, you know, you play on the edge and he plays there, doesn't he? How disappointed? Well, yeah, very. But, I mean, we'll deal with that behind closed doors and move on.
On the back of last week, though? A little bit frustrating to still see it?
Oh, yeah, but I guess, you know, frustration doesn't just come with what happens from your own players. Frustration comes from when things aren't consistent. And yes, should he have done what he did? No, he shouldn't have. But he's a man who plays with a lot of intent, a lot of attitude in every game he's played in, including last week. So you're going to get moments where he could do something that you would probably classify as dumb. And that was right up there, I guess, as being as good as it can get when you're dumb. But to his credit, he came back on and did what he needed to do and got his head back in the game, and that's all again neck you and ask. So it's a constant work on for Colsey, and it's a good reminder for him.
Yep, Ross in the front row here.
Steve, Sonny Bill's play tonight, it seemed like his directness adds a lot to your attack, because it was a good example of why he's so important.
Yeah, well, Sonny's been under a lot of pressure, hasn't played many games because of his injury, and you know he's had a run of games and played well tonight. You know, and when we needed someone to go to direct, you know, funnily enough, the ball would go into his hands and he'd do that. So you know, we're pretty happy with how he played.
Clay, where you go?
Steve, Artie, Savia, down here. Had another immense game tonight. What have you made of what he's done over the last couple of weeks in that number 6 jersey?
Look, I was really happy with how the trio went. You know, it's an interesting one for All Black Rugby. We don't normally have 2 short blokes, but you know the physicality that the skip's bringing, and the physicality that Artie brings, and the physicality that Sam brings allows us to probably do that. We may have suffered a wee bit at line-out time because of it, not because of Artie's inability in the line-out, but you know the opposition get a little more comfortable when they don't have to mark big guys. That we'll see what we can do around that. But look, Artie's had an outstanding season, probably the best player in Super Rugby. And when he carries, doesn't he? Like if you don't tackle him, you've got 3 or 4 other people trying to stop him, and that gives you a great go forward and allows your team to, you know, to come onto the ball and make good decisions.
Yep, where you go, Phil?
Steve, the attacking's always very exciting to see, but I thought the greatest improvement tonight compared with last week was the defence. How much work, and who was I'm presuming it was Scott McLeod, but how much work was actually done on defence this week?
Yeah, well, Scotty's going great, but, you know, first and foremost, it's a lot easier to defend when you've got 15 guys on the park, particularly against a team that's going forward and has got an attacking attitude like Australia does when they get on a roll. So that's the first big plus. So you can say, right, well, we've got our discipline well enough to be able to do that. But no, Stormy has come back this year with a plan on how he wants us to defend, and you know, he's driving that well and deserves a lot of credit. So very, very happy, and to be able to keep a team like Australia to you know, a donut is very, very pleasing. But also tells you a lot about what the attitude was like, because you know when you talk about attitude, you'll always see it in your defence.
Nige down the back.
Kieran, what does it feel like to be scrumming at lock when a 7-man scrum absolutely sticks it to an 8-man scrum? And do you reckon you've got maybe another 4 years playing in the second row?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, last week as well I went to lock and scrum went all right. So I don't think I'll
be careful.
End up like Todd Blackadder. But look, it's what you do for the team, eh? And I don't mind going in there and giving it heaps.
We'll go for a couple more questions. We've got Daniel over here.
Steve, when you look back on your time as the All Blacks head coach and as the assistant coach as well, you've kept the Bledisloe Cup under lock and key the entire time. What will that mean to you when you look back on that later on?
Oh, massive. You know, like as we've talked about for many years now, it's outside of the World Cup, it's the most important trophy we have, and you know, we seem to have this thing in World Cup years that we come to that final game when we have to win it, and it's just a nice feeling to be able to say, well, not on my watch.
Clay, wrap it up.
Kieran, Steve spoke about yourself, Artie and Sam. What stood out to you the most about playing alongside those two guys the last couple of weeks?
I think combinations for us will get better as we play together, but you know, physicality is where the loose forward play is gets won or lost on both sides of the ball. So tonight was an example of where we need to be. I thought in combination with those two, if you can have impacts across the park, it works well for us. And tonight was an occasion where we were all up and ready to go. And so I think it will just, the more you play together, you'll get used to each other, and it'll keep working on it.
And I'd add to that, Matty Todd did a good job when he came on. You know, like it wasn't just the three starters. Matty Todd came on and did and complemented what we'd been doing, and his defence when he came on was pretty magnificent.